Hey there, everybody. We are going to do something a little bit different this time. We are going to be reading The Gift of the Magi, and I'm reading it from home and asking you the react and write questions. So on Google Classroom, you'll find that you have 7 questions, and they're the react and write specifically for The Gift of the Magi. So as I'm reading, I'm going to pause and ask you those questions as we go through. You can do a split screen if you want to, if that helps. That way you can answer as I am asking you the question, if that works best for you. Otherwise, you can click from tab to tab. It does not matter. This is going to be a little bit different only because you will be assigned this for the weekend and into Monday and or Tuesday, depending on if you're cohort A or cohort B. So Thursday, it'll be assigned for Friday before you come in on Monday, and then Friday, it'll be assigned for the weekend or for Monday before you come in on Tuesday. So make sure that you do this, because then we can actually have a really good discussion about this story and talk about the figurative language and everything that is in here. So it's called The Gift of the Magi. And if you go to the PDF on Google Classroom, it's there. So that will be beneficial for you. You can just follow along right there. So it's by Owen Henry. You can obviously read information about the author if you'd like, but there are 5 vocabulary words that we'll have for this one. There's 4 here. Make sure that when you do your vocab, which hopefully you'll be doing that after your test on Thursday or Friday, that you use these vocab definitions. And then there's one more. I think that word is prosperity. Prosperity is the 5th one. So you'll have to do that. You'll have to know those for the test for the Gift of the Magi. So I am going to just start, and like I said, I'm going to stop every once in a while and ask questions. But actually, before I do that, I have 2 questions beforehand. So the first one is, let's see. Okay, right here. What does it mean to make a sacrifice? What sacrifices have you had to make in your life, and who or what is worth making sacrifices for? So in like 3 to 5 sentences, take a couple minutes and just kind of write that down. What does it mean to sacrifice something? What would you sacrifice? And have you ever done that? And who is it worth? Who's worth sacrificing for? So be prepared. Obviously, one of the reasons I want you to write these down is because we'll probably talk about this when we have our discussion next week. The next question, and you can always go back to this, obviously, is look at these pictures, kind of like what we did with the Most Dangerous Game. We looked at the pictures, and we are making predictions based on what the story is about. Sorry if I'm freezing on the screen. Hopefully you can at least hear me. So look at the pictures. Think about what the story might be about. Based on the images you just saw, what do you predict the story will be about? Show them again as you're writing. All right. So it's called The Gift of the Magi. And if you remember, I had already brought this up before about what the Gift of the Magi means, but I'm not going to talk about that just yet because I'm hoping you'll figure that out. $1.87, that was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl, so Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Next question. What do you think this quote means? Life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. If you don't know what predominating means, you should look it up. So take a minute and write down what you think that means. All right. Hopefully you're ready. This is attached to in Google Classroom if you're a little behind or if you need to go back and look. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home, a furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beg her description, but it certainly had that word on lookout for the Medici squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox, into which no letter would go, an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity, when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced you as Della, which is all very good. Okay, the next question. Based on what we just read, what is Della and Jim's current financial situation? And how do you know that based on what detail tells you that or gives you that information? All right, next. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow will be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass at an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they had both taken a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all of his treasures piled up in a basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. All right, next question. What are Della and Jim's prized possessions? Why are these things so important to them? So really think about how they described these possessions. One was describing how the Queen of Sheba would be jealous, or maybe not so much jealous, but wish she would have what Della has. And the other was King Solomon, who would pluck at his beard from envy, meaning he was jealous because he didn't have what Jim had, even though they have all these other riches. But that just kind of tells you how important, and the author wants you to know how important these possessions are because it is important for later on in the story. So think about that. What are the possessions and why are these things so important to them? All right, moving on. Okay. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her, and then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with brilliant sparkles still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign said Madame Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran and collected herself, panting, Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me, quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hash metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home and with 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on the account of the old leather strap that he used in place of the chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the fry pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on a corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard a step on the stair, way down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying silent little prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty. The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Okay, our next question. Why do you think Jim is staring at Della so strangely? What do you think he is thinking and feeling in this moment? There's no right or wrong answer because you don't really know the answer. So, like I've always said, just answer what you think. One thing I like to talk about, and I'll probably talk about this in class, but when it says that he was as immovable as a setter at the son of quail, think about what a setter is, okay? And then quail. Quail we know is a bird. A setter is a hunting dog, so like an English setter or whatever. When dogs are hunting for birds, when they smell the birds, they stop and they point, and they just stop suddenly, and their tails point and they lift their paw. And so that's what Jim did. He stopped so suddenly, like a setter at the son of quail. And so that kind of terrified Della. Okay. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. Jim, darling, she cried, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. You've cut off your hair? Asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I? Jim looked about the room curiously. You say your hair is gone, he said, with an air of almost idiocy. You needn't look for it, said Della. It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, she went on with sudden serious sweetness, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put on the chops, Jim? I like that line. That's why it's underlined. That's why I crossed the other part out, because when you hear it without the, she went on, maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, but nobody could ever count my love for you. So she's basically saying, like, if I were to count each individual hair on my head, you could do that. But no matter how much hair is on my head, it doesn't even equate to how much I love you. So this just tells you how important he is to her. Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He unfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. So basically, $8 a week or $1 million a year, what is the difference? So a mathematician is automatically going to look at the numbers. Numbers are the proof, okay? Million is more than 8, but it doesn't compare to love. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said, about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that can make me like my girl any less. That's so sweet. But if you unwrap that package, you may see why you had me go on a while at first. White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat, for there lay the combs. The set of combs side and back that Della had worshipped for long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned their coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, my hair grows so fast, Jim. And then Della leaped up like a singed cat and cried, oh, oh. Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it. Instead of obeying, Jim trembled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Dell, said he, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put on the chops? The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat, who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that all who give gifts, these two are the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest, they are the Magi. All right, so the last question. Why does O. Henry state that Della and Jim are the Magi? Remember, and I didn't tell you this, I told you this a while ago, but the Magi are three wise men from the Christmas story in the Bible. So why would he consider Della and Jim to be Magi? So that's your last question. Think about it. Talk about it to yourself, I guess, unless you're with a friend. And then finish that up. And then we will have hopefully some good discussion when I see you. Okay? Have a great day, night, weekend, wherever you are at this point in time. And if you need me, just send me an email. Okay? We'll talk to you soon.